Hi everybody, Tim Hughes here. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite. With me today I've got David Tweddle, and we're going to be talking about journeys from certainly David's personal journey, but also we're going to be talking about how you can be more empathetic. We're going to be talking about how you can use emotional intelligence, all kinds of things. David, where can people find you?
I'm found at LinkedIn, David Tweddle, and at Facebook, David Stephen Tweddle, and on Instagram, Tweds, Twedz.
David, thank you so much for coming on. Let's wanted to get straight in there. So, talking about resilience and the foundation of resilience, you've experienced a level of loss that most people cannot fathom. Usually we hear about resilience in a sort of like bounce back context, but you live it in as daily practice. How did the loss of your sons fundamentally change your definition of what strong man or a strong leader looks like?
That's a great starter. So people, the one thing I hated, Tim, that happened quite often was people would say, "Oh, Tweds, you're the strongest person I know. If anybody can get through this, it's you. You know, you can do this. You're really strong." And that was their definition of strength. And it wasn't true. I was never that strong. You know, I cry when I watch Strictly, for example. So people ask me how I'm still here, you know, how I got through. And I thought about what strength is, you know, and for me, it wasn't what got me through, or it wasn't how I got through. It was why I got through and why I pursued and stayed positive, and why I founded this idea to be able to help people from my tragedies. So why it became very important. And when I looked at strength, for me, very simple. A trusted leader is a strong leader. A trusted leader who's defined by excellence of empathetic skills, for example, the ability to interactively to listen, to be honest, and to be reliable. If I can find those traits in anybody, then I believe that they are a strong person.
So defining disappointment, you developed a specific framework, the 7 stages of disappointment. Why did you choose the word disappointment rather than grief or failure to describe the professional and personal hurdles we face?
Well, that one came while I was walking the dogs.
Some of the best ideas do.
Some of the best ideas do, Tim. I found that you don't need to grieve. You don't need to be in a real I failed state to have a recovery model. I learned as a Samaritan that disappointment has a very, very fast track to despair. So if our followers and our leaders and our fellow humans are in that state of despair and tragedy, then everybody can have a route out. And I found that these 7 steps were a route out that was common both for my situation and for many situations that I saw in the corporate world, whether you lost a deal, you know, whether you got fired or whatever it might have been, right? That's disappointment. It doesn't have to be grief in order to be able to go through these steps. And really, to boil it down, you know, if you lose your sons, you lose a deal, you flunk an exam, you don't get a job, or you crack a fingernail, the response of the body is exactly the same: fight, flight, or freeze. And to get through that fight, flight, or freeze and get that adrenaline out your system, it's great to have a map. And that map for me was the 7 stages. And it really worked,
So let's get into that. So navigating the 7 stages, can you walk us through those 7 stages, especially which stage do you find professionals get stuck in most, and when a project fails or a career pivot happens?
Okay. So I'm very conscious that I come across quite often as very matter of fact and very forthright. And, oh, you know, I had 2 sons that died and I used 7 stages and I'm through and life's all good. And, you know, it's not like that. We all know it's not like that. I'm just trying to get as much of the very salient information across as I possibly can. But in the context of losing my boys or failing to get a job, the path is exactly the same. The path is to get to the goal that you need which in this instance is to acceptance. So looking at the 7 steps, well, the first thing is shock. Well, I've had 2 7 a.m. calls that said, your son's dead. So I've experienced shock. I can't even start to describe on a call what that feels like. The shock is incredible. You then go from shock to denial. And I'm going to come back to denial in a moment. Then you go to anger. Of course you do. I've been very angry. And then you get to bargaining. And bargaining for me is a big waste of time. That's the shoulda, woulda, coulda, or if only, or it's their fault. I should have done, this shouldn't have happened, that bargaining piece. And then you go from bargaining to depression. I still suffer from depression. So I can say to anybody on this call, if you suffer from depression or feel it, please get medical help as soon as you can and get the appropriate medication and support. It really helped, and it's helped me. So once you get through that depression and you start to come out the other side and you can start to see the sunshine, then you get to testing. I never thought I'd laugh, dance, smile, walk, or do anything. But my incredible family just took me a tiny step at a time to see if I would dance, see if I would laugh, see if I would go to a theatre. And it worked. And you came through and you get to acceptance, which is where I am now. I can say I'm in acceptance, but it doesn't matter that, it doesn't mean that I still don't get depressed and angry, etc. Now, you asked the question, Tim, which is the sticky one? The sticky one is denial. Denial is a killer. It's where you start lying to yourself and lying to others about the situation. And you end up in a circle of doom, going down and down, start blaming people, and then you become a busy fool and start to do anything apart from addressing the problem. And it's normally based on your ego. I hate ego. Your ego is the thing at work, particularly when you've failed, that you don't want to damage. It wasn't ego in my case, it was loss. But let's all remember, get through denial as fast as you humanly can, because it will get you back to acceptance.
So just to recap, so shock, anger, denial, beginning, bargaining, depression, testing, and acceptance.
Yeah.
I think I think it's a really good framework, David, and I can see and I can agree with you. I think we've all had loss in our lives, and I think we can all empathize and see the stages to actually go through. And I agree with you that I agree with you with all of those points, really. So
cool.
I wanted to talk to you. You mentioned earlier on about Samaritans, and so tell us about what you learned with working for Samaritans as a bereaved father who lost his sons, and what have you learned over that healing process?
Okay. Well, it goes without saying, the biggest learning curve for me on this is the depth of love I now have for my wife, and I always had for my wife, for my children, for my grandchildren, and for the friends that were around me. People have been incredible. And I learned that having the right people around you in this kind of state of despair is critically important. They were incredible people. But the real answer to tell you what have I learned in the last 5 to 10 years, it'd probably take me 2 days. So I'm going to try and boil it down. We talked earlier about the dog walk. I had an epiphany, right? And it resulted in me developing this consulting service that I now provide.
Yeah.
And it was a realization on this journey. I've been diagnosed with acute double PTSD. So you combine my journey with the work at the Samaritans, talking to people in states of despair and suicide. There are massive synergies between the corporate world, building teams, and talking to people on the edge and where I was. So from this, I realized I could help people and teams get back together from the tragedy that I had experienced. And I know the boys would have been okay with that. So hence I delivered the session very much around empathy, active listening, and the development of trust. But if I was allowed one sentence, as you said, what's the one? For me, it's stop sweating the small stuff. Don't bother with the small stuff. And use all that energy to keep those loved ones around you Your house, your car, your watch, and your pen do not define you. What defines you are those incredible people that were there at every turn in my darkest times. And for me, that's what I've learned. Surround yourself with the right people at work and personally.
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic story, David, because one of the things that happened over COVID was the world changed. So we were in a situation where before COVID, where there was work and there was our personal lives. Then over COVID, we were sitting on calls and the dog would come in or the kids would come in or whatever. And then what's happened, one of the changes is that we now have whole lives. And as leaders, we need to understand not just that Tim Hughes wants a promotion, but Tim Hughes has aged parents or he's got to go on the school run or whatever. And we've got to bring that and that emotional intelligence and that empathy to understand and support them in that, as I said, not just the promotion or whatever.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
Absolutely, Tim. You're dead right. We are a complete package. We're not robots. And particularly in today's world with AI, when we start looking and seeing the effects of emotional intelligence, we need emotional intelligence because times are changing and we are a whole human package, not just, a robot at work.
You've done some amazing things in terms of your leveling in corporate life. You reached VP at Oracle and SAP. You've been in some really big leadership positions. You were also dealing with sort of high stakes disappointments, lost deals, market shifts. How did you apply your 7-stage framework to lead teams through those moments without burning them out?
Okay. Well, I guess subconsciously I did this because let's remember I was working a lot before the boys had died, and I didn't know the 7 stages. But now on reflection, this is how I can bring the synergy of the 7 stages to the corporate world. And the really big one for me was get through shock and anger and all of that rubbish down the pub on a Thursday night and get immediately to testing. When your deal's gone south or when you've been fired or when you've had a total nightmare, get to testing. Because testing is where you're going to really find the new solution. The first thing to do in testing, immediately after action review, get everybody in that was involved in the project, get everybody's view. Don't be judgmental, listen to them. Get that action review after action review underway and learn from what we did. Have a look at stop, start, and continue. What do we stop doing? What do we start doing? And what do we continue doing? And then, my favorite of all, let's get to the art of the possible. Let's remove all the blockers. Let's get the magic wand out. And if we had that magic wand, what would this transformation or this achieving the objective look like? And really just forget all of the blockers that are in the way. And then once you've got that going, the question really is, what's the worst that can happen? Well, I've had the worst that can happen twice. So nothing can bother me. Nothing can faze me. And I need to get that across to the people that listen to me in the corporate world. What's the worst that can happen? It's not that bad. So you get your big pants on, you go out and you try again. Yeah. And that is all kerneled around testing because that'll get you to acceptance and you'll get a new, possibly better solution out of it anyway.
So the empathy gap, you advocate for empathy as a standout trait. In the cutthroat world of tier 1 tech, did you find that the lead with empathy approach was mistaken for weakness? How did you handle that?
No. The Samaritans really taught me the importance of empathy. They trained me to pieces. And the importance of empathy, it saves lives and it changes lives. It's the absolute differentiator in today's world. ChatGPT is 3 years old, and we're already starting to see the effect of automation like it delivers in our home. So if we can't be alongside of that with emotional intelligence, we've got a serious situation, and empathy underpins that emotional intelligence all the way. So it was never looked upon as a weak trait. It's actually, for me, it's a core competency now. It's not a tick box on my appraisal. It's a core competency. There was times that people would say, oh, you know, you talk them off the bridge in the Samaritans. Oh, you're a big roughy tufty. Never, never, ever did I ever talk anybody off a bridge. I listened a nurse off a hospital roof, and I did it by just giving her space to talk so she could tell me her issues. And then she found her own solutions, visualized success, and thank goodness she came down. So in this empathetic world that we need to be in, there is no space for ego, and there is absolutely no space for macho nonsense whatsoever. We've really got to give people space, no judgment, no interruptions, I believe, Tim.
We've had a comment from Ben Baldpet, who says, absolutely agree, Tweds.
Very kind of him. I'll send him a tenner later.
So, an active listening is a tool. Most people listen to respond rather than listen to understand. How does mastering active listening actually accelerate someone's journey through the stages of disappointment?
Brilliant. So I joined the Samaritans selfishly, from a selfish point of view, because I needed to learn to listen more. And oh my God, did they teach me to listen. It was incredible. So they taught me about being absolutely 100% fully engaged in the conversation that you're in. You cannot be part engaged in a conversation with somebody. For example, if they're just about to jump from the bridge, I can't be sat there doing my text on my telephone like they do in the boardrooms while you're talking, or I can't start doing email like they do in the boardrooms when I'm trying to get this guy off the bridge. It meant every single sinew of my body, every single sense from my eyes to my hands were engaged in this person. And I was maniacally focused on their eye movements, their body movements, the tone of their
Sorry, but David seems to have frozen there. I'm hoping he's going to come back at some point. Or maybe it's I've frozen and oh. So David seems to have lost the line. So I'm waiting for him to call back in. Hopefully, he'll be back in a couple of seconds, and then we'll start that one again.
Tim.
Hello, David.
Hello. My laptop died. Blame that laptop right there. It died. I don't know what happened, but I can give it a go from my telephone.
Okay. So what I suggest we do is we stop. I'll count to 3, and then I'll ask you about active listening again.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Let's go.
Then I'll cut that and to put it up on the. And thank you, Ben and LinkedIn user, for telling me that David is frozen. I appreciate that. So I'll count to 3, and then I'll do the active listening question.
Okay.
So active listening is a tool. Most people listen to respond rather than listen to understand. How does mastering active listening actually accelerate someone's journey through the stages of disappointment?
Okay. So active listening for me is a critical trait, and I knew I was a rubbish listener. So I joined the Samaritans. One of the reasons was to learn to listen properly, and they really taught me absolutely engage, absolutely listen. I remember when I was in the office, people would be tapping away on the telephones or tapping away on the laptop while I'm talking, and they'd be claiming to listening to me. And it was never really the case. To be engaged with somebody, particularly if they're on a bridge or in a prison, making some very bad life choices, total, absolute active listening is critical to get them through the problems that they've got so we can get them to acceptance. So, we say to people, are you hearing what I'm saying? And they'll say, yeah, I'm hearing you. And then you'll say, are you listening to what I'm saying? Yeah, I'm listening. Or are you actively listening? Is every single sense that you have totally and utterly engaged in this conversation? So let me give you an example, Tim. I speak at about 150 words a minute, yet our brains can process 500 words a minute. So what happens to the other 350 cognitive cycles that we have? Well, in the office, when people were tapping away in the boardroom while somebody was giving a presentation, that's where the 350 went. Or they were looking out the window and wondering what was for the tea. Or they were playing Scrabble on the telephone and were not really engaged. Well, I can tell you that if you are truly, utterly, actively listening to somebody who thinks they're going to commit suicide, or you've got a member of staff that really needs your help, you will be fatigued after that conversation because you will have used every one of those 500 cognitive cycles to listen to that person. And during that process, again, I'm going to say it, no ego, no interruptions, no opinions, no advice, no judgment, because they're all things that boost my ego if I'm displaying them. They do nothing for the person I'm talking to. So focus on the goal. In the Samaritans, we saved lives. In the corporate world, we'll achieve the goals.
So trust as a currency. You speak about trust as a core professional trait. If someone has reached out or someone has reached the stage of despair in a corporate environment, how can a leader use trust to pull them back into the stage of action?
Well, I have a saying, trust is won in drops and lost in buckets. It is such a valuable commodity, and it takes so long to fill that bucket, and it's so easy to kick it over. So let me give you an example. When Gary went missing in Australia, I was allocated a family liaison officer. He was a hard, 5'10", bald as a coot, Greek origin, ex-SWAT team weapons specialist. Not really the forte for an FLO, but he was brilliant. And in 7 weeks, he developed so much trust with me, Tim, that he carried my boy in with me to the final resting place. He was the pallbearer next to me at the front of the coffin, not only carrying Gary in, but he was bloody holding me up to get me through that door.
Yeah.
So how did he do that? Well, he did that over those 7 weeks because he was credible. He was honest and he listened and he never judged us. And you can imagine me and Michelle were in some pretty strange places at the time with some of our decisions and thoughts. He actively listened with empathy. He put himself into our situation and therefore was able to help. That's what we need to do in the corporate world a lot more. And he managed his own emotions. So when everybody was, the temperatures were getting hot, right, at various times, he stayed cool. He kept the whole thing cool. Again, great self-management, great understanding his own triggers. And he had no self-interest whatsoever. He didn't give a monkeys if he got promoted to president of Australian. He didn't care. He just cared about Michelle and I. And he was incredible. So his support and his behavior and his actions managed to keep me in a state of despair, still delivering and in 100% action mode. Incredible guy, and delivered the most valuable of the assets, trust.
I just wanted to say that David Chamberlain has said, you're absolutely right, David. Just to say that LinkedIn user is, the reason why it says LinkedIn user is the fact that you have to give permission to LinkedIn to share your data.
Okay.
The armed forces, military training is often about suppressing emotion to achieve the mission. I think sometimes we often do that in the corporate world. How do you reconcile that mission first mindset with the emotional intelligence required to be a resilient advocate today?
All right. Well, let me say without a shadow of a doubt, some of the most emotionally intelligent people I've ever had the pleasure to work with or meet are forces people. Not all of them, but most of them. So if anybody in this call is looking to hire somebody, do not hesitate. Do not discount the squaddy. they will bring you some incredible values. So to answer your question, Tim, I've been in many situations, and I can really be honest, we never suppressed our emotions. That would be something that would be very folly in a lot of situations we found ourselves. What we actually did, and what we're very good at doing, is compartmentalizing our emotions, because you can go from one situation to another situation in a picosecond, and you need a very different set of emotions to deal with each of those. So the ability to compartmentalize them is critical, but the ability or the fact that you've got the emotional intelligence is vital. So let's think about it in an empathetic and an emotional intelligence kind of way. At the very center of everything the forces do, everything, is the objective and the teamwork. So that is the center of empathy, right? It's the same in the corporate world. Once we've got the teamwork going, then it's a maniacal goal focus. You absolutely go for that goal. Then you get meticulous, proven planning and risk analysis and an intense communication strategy. And the way that manifests itself and shows is by the time you go out to execute what you've got to execute, you know what you've got to do, what the guy next to you's got to do, what the team supporting you are going to do. Everybody knows how they're going to do it, when they're going to do it, what they're going to do it with, and what success looks like. To be able to do all of those things that I've just said, you need incredible emotional intelligence, because, and this is the key to it, and you get this in the corporate world, you need implicit trust on the person on your left and the person on your right, or the person in the boardroom. You cannot survive without that. And the way that they get my implicit trust is by being credible and having the appropriate disciplines to execute what we have.
So, David, thank you so much for the conversation today. One last question, which is if you could go back to the version of David Tweddle who just started out at Oracle, knowing everything you know now about loss and the 7 stages, what's the one piece of advice that you give to anybody to stay grounded?
Well, before I step through the door of Oracle, I'll be straight down the Royal Berks Hospital and get an ego bypass, because that is the absolute inverse and antithesis of empathetic behavior and empathy. Get rid of the ego. It's self. Just look at some of the political leaders in the world today and the damage they're doing with their egotistical behavior. So that's one thing. Second thing, get to acceptance fast. Get to acceptance. Don't mill about in would have, should have, could have. Don't mill about in denial and lying and just being a busy fool. There are a million busy fools out there. Don't bother around admonishing the responsibility and blaming everybody else. Just get through to acceptance fast. And I said earlier, it's not easy, this stuff. It's taken me years to do this from my personal point of view. So, let's all understand it takes time. But let me very quickly tell you a very quick story about getting to acceptance.
Yep.
That policeman I told you about, who was our family liaison officer, hard as nails. We were in a room and the chief of police came in and he said, "I'm really sorry to tell you, but this situation has now gone from rescue to recovery. In other words, we believe Gary is dead." And we didn't know where his body was, and we wouldn't know for another 7 weeks. And my entire world just fell through me, right? I mean, I can't explain what that was like, but I did. And he leaned over to me just like this, because he was sat next to me, and he said, Tweds, think about the elephants. And I'm like, jeepers, man, Steve, what are you talking about? Think about the elephants. I've just been told my son's dead. He said, no. He said, let me tell you about the elephants, son. He said, when the elephants are going across the plains in Africa and one of the elephants becomes deceased, he said, the matriarch, she stops and she lets all the elephants gather round and mourn the dead elephant for a day. And after that day, she starts heading off and going to the direction where the food is, where the safety is, where the water is, and where they can survive.
Yep.
And all the elephants have got a choice, right? They can either stay there around that elephant that's passed away without any safety, without any water, and without any food, or they can follow the rest of the herd and get to safety. And Steve just turned to me with that story and he said, "You're the matriarch now. You know who your elephants are, and they know what they've got to do." And I blended that into what I loved about the corporate life. If you've got the right people on the right bus, in the right seats, going in the right direction, you can't fail but to be successful. And that's absolutely critical. And today, couple that up with EI, and you've got a half a chance of surviving.
David, thank you so much for coming on and talking about your experience and sharing the power of empathy and emotional intelligence and leadership, etc. If people wanted to get hold of you, where would they be able to get hold of you?
LinkedIn, Facebook, David at lumiereconsulting.ai, and Tweds on Instagram.
Excellent. David, thank you so much for today. Really appreciated. And thank you for sharing all your story and